My name is Chakran Portal, and I'm here to introduce our speaker. I'm from Hopkins, Minnesota. I'm a member of CGSI, and Jan Dus is a professional genealogist who currently resides in Polička, Czech Republic, which happens to be the region where my grandparents all came from, and I am impressed with his resume. He speaks several languages. He is very flexible with the people who he has helped. I've talked to several people who used his services and will recommend him. And he is here to give us what we need in trying to find the records we need. So let's give a warm welcome to Reverend Jan Dus.
Well, this is the title of our presentation of the time which we are going to spend together now for an hour and 30 minutes. If you are up to all of the time. If you are not, feel free to leave. The door is open. I request that it stays so, just in case you want to sneak out or just get up and walk out. It's up to you. This is also what you can. This is what you can expect from this presentation. 1997. I was a young minister, and I was serving a church in Polička, in the very center of the Czech Republic. And in the spring of that year, a little church in Borova got yoked to the church in Polička because it did not have a pastor for some time. So I was asked to serve both of these churches. Well, I made my entree into Borova, and I made sure that the Borova church understood that I was a great driver and I was a great genealogist. One of the very first worships that I was traveling to, I was leaving from the church in Polička and I was going to the church in Borova. And because the two worships were immediately after each other, I just kept the robe on and jumped into the car and just drove over. Well, at that time, the car which I was driving was running two possible fuels. It was running petroleum gas, and it was running the propane. And as I was approaching the church, it was cold. It was in the middle of the winter, and I knew I was driving propane. I knew I would not be able to start the propane because propane is not good with cold starts. So I thought I would switch it over. And I already saw the church. It was like maybe 300 yards away. So I pushed the button to switch over from propane to gas. Well, when you switch over from propane to gas, what happens is that the engine stops for a while. And you need the wheels moving. So the wheels make the engine to start again, and it sucks the new fuel. Well, the engine stopped, and the wheels did too, because I was on an icy road. And I started flying, and I ended up at the back of my car in the fence of a lady who was living just next door of the church. There was a big bang. The lady ran out of the church and started yelling, "What the..." At that moment, he saw me getting out of the car, and she said, "Hey, hello, minister." That was my entree into the Borova church. But there were some friends in the United States, so they made sure that it didn't stay only with this one reputation of being a great driver. And they informed people around themselves in Minnetonka and Minnesota and Ponca City and St. Paul that I was speaking English. So the other thing which happened when I started serving this Borova church was that people learned that this guy speaks English and he can look for our translator, for our ancestors in the church books. And I started receiving all of those requests. Could you find my grandpa? Could you find my grandma? And hey, I slowly but surely got into that. And I started liking it. And well, 12 years later, here I am, loving genealogy. And I believe I know who is the name of the guy who is from Minnetonka and who stands behind there. I'll talk to him later about it. But the good news is there is way more resources available for you online than there were 12 years ago or 15 years ago. There is way more which you can find online nowadays than you were ever able to find before. And we are going to talk about it today. So basically, these are our goals for today. I'm not going to read it for you because I think you can do it for yourselves. Basically, the basic question is how far you are willing to go. You can stop immediately. You can decide that you want to hand it all over to others and let them do the work. But you can also accept the invitation and get on the adventurous path of searching for history of your ancestors. And you will encounter situations when you will not know what is waiting for you around the corner. There might be a piece of gold, or there might be a piece of something else. You might learn things which you never wanted to learn about your family. But you might also get into a situation when you will not want to stop. And you have been pre-warned. If you decide that you do want to get into genealogy, if you decide that you do want to make your hands dirty with the real work, and you don't want to leave everything just to me and Michal Erasmus, which we would love to, you might want to focus on this. I will be talking first about what is available online as far as Slovakia and Czech Republic goes. And the first thing which is good for you to understand is that each one of these countries has the crucial records stored in archives. This happened in 1949, a year after the communist coup, a year after the communists took over, that the communist government was not that satisfied with churches taking records of people, keeping baptism records and wedding records and death records. Because if you are a totalitarian government and if you want to control people, you don't like others, and especially your enemies like churches, to be kind of meddling into your business. So in 1949, only 1 year after the communists came to power, they passed a law which said that every church, every single congregation has to pass all of their records over to the state. And the state will be taking care of them from now on. And the state started taking care of them. And those were not only records of living people, those were also old historical records. Eventually, after some time, the records ended up in archives. And the interesting thing is that until today, even 25 years into democracy, archives are not under the Ministry of Culture, where I would be expecting them to be, but under the Ministry of Inner Affairs, like the Czech secret services, like the police. Interesting. But the archives are actually a good thing for a genealogist, because you don't need to go from church to church and look into the records and make appointments with ministers. You can go to one place and it is stored in there. Or actually, in the case of Slovakia, you have to go to 7 different places. Or in the case of the Czech Republic, you get to go to 8 different places. But it is still better than thousands of places. And the advantage is also that these places are much easier to handle it, and they are those places which got online. So in Slovakia, we have 7 different regional archives, as you can see by the different colors of different regions. And you just, if you are searching for your ancestors in Slovakia, the first thing which you need to know is which region your ancestors came from. At this point, you don't need to know the name of the village, you don't need to know the name of the town, but knowing the region is kind of crucial. The case of the Czech Republic is very similar. The archives are divided into 8 different regions, and again, it is good to know which regions your ancestors came from. Well, there is another resource, and that is the familysearch.org, which I believe is known to everybody here in this room. I'm sure you have done your work on this. But maybe I might be able to show you a little secret which the family search is hiding and which you might not be that familiar with. Let's have a closer look. Well, what I like about family search is that you don't need to sign in, you don't need to be a member, you can use it temporarily, you can kind of play with it and decide to become a member after a while, after you will decide that really it does the job for you. So I just started playing with that and I typed in my name, Jan Dus, and was wondering what will show up. Well, interestingly enough, 2 years ago when I was first presenting this presentation, in its first version there was not one single mention of the name Jan Dus on family search. (9,104) in 2015. Just in the scope of 2 years, it went from 0 to 9,000. And because it starts on 0, I don't think that you really can show it in percentages. I don't know how many percent. Well, I kept playing on because this is really fun. So I put in name Novak, which is probably the most frequent name. It would be like Smith in English, probably. And, well, it went from 1,781 in 2013 to 812,000 in the year of 250. It tells us many different things. The first thing which it tells us is that family search does work. That people put in their materials and that the website is able to take care of them and to include them into one system, which is very efficient. So it is an interesting resource. But it tells us also several other things. With my name, I might still suppose that Dus being quite a rare name, maybe a good portion of the 9,000 people might be somehow related to me. I could suppose that. But with Novak, I don't think so. 800,000. And actually, the experience shows that me supposing that some good portion of the 9,000 would be related to me would be a wrong step as well, because I had one single client whose ancestors, whose father was Dus, her maiden name was Dus. I thought this is going to be a piece of pie for me. This is going to be just a very easy job. I'll just go several generations back. I have done my homework with my own family, so I'll connect it to my family, and then I'll be able to basically connect our two families and show, hey, we are related, here we go. I never did. I went all the way back to 1600s, as far as the books were available, and that Dus line and my Dus line do not merge. So there's another thing which is very important to remember. When you are serious about genealogy, where you don't just want to show a nice family tree which looks plausible but is not really that accurate. And that thing which you need to remember is having the same name does not mean that we are related. And don't fall for the trap of wanting to find out how you are related to someone just because you have the same name. Just look for your own ancestors, centuries back. One of the reasons why you don't want to do that is also that family names were not as stable in the past as they are now. They would change on many different occasions. And if you want to know why and how, you better come to my lecture on Saturday. But there is one more thing which the family search is good for, and that is a hidden treasure, I tell you. And there is a way how to get to that. It is not that easy, and actually it seems to me that 2 years ago when I was first preparing this presentation, it was way easier. I believe that there might be some secret reason why the IT people are hiding that from us. But we can find it. What you do is you browse for all public collections. The next step is that you choose continental Europe and you choose Czech Republic. And then you choose your preferred collection, and basically you choose either between church books or land records. It depends on if you are interested in basic personal data, birth, wedding, death record, which would be the first choice for me. If I were starting a genealogical research, I would go with church books. If you already know about the person or about the people, about your ancestors, and you want to look at in their ownership, you look at land records. But what is interesting, look at the scope of time which these records are covering. That's unimaginable. It's basically 400 years each. So you go with these, one of these. Now, it opens basically a site which looks very similar like the one before, but be careful. Don't push search. Even though you do search, you need to do it manually. You scroll all the way down on the same website. This is the lower part of the site. And you look for It's like if you are borrowing money from the bank. Look for the small script. Don't worry about the big letters, just forget about those. Look for the small script. Down there, browse through, and then it gives you a number of images for that particular country. When I was doing that a month ago in the Czech Republic, it showed 4,668,489 images. And you push that. It said browse for and then number of images, and it is all the way down on the same website. And when you push it, it just asks you for religion, for region, and for place. And if you know the religion of your ancestors, either Catholic or Protestant or Jewish, if you know the region, if you know the part of the Czech Republic they came from, and if you know the name of the locality or the name of the town, what will open for you is a real treasure, the books, the real scanned registers, which are in the archives. And then you just, those are either baptismal books, or they are books of weddings, marriage records, or they are death records. And if you open any one of them, you get really an image of what is in there. And there are millions and millions of these scanned images in there. The problem is the OCR cannot read it for you. You have to read it yourself. So it's a piece of work, but it is worth it. Yes, please, there's a question.
It's my understanding that those records are being digitized so that you can search them as opposed to, and then link to the originals. Do you happen to know where family search is on the actual digitization?
No, unfortunately not. These records cannot be digitized because they were handwritten.
Yeah,
what the family search?
If they were going to index them, actually pull that information off so that you could search.
Exactly. What the family search is doing is it is indexing them, it is extracting the information from these records, and some of them have been indexed, but take into account that these are millions and millions of pages. So it will still take quite a long time before all of that will be indexed. And it is not being indexed by a computer, it is being indexed by people, and people make mistakes. So one of my rules in genealogy is don't trust anybody. You need to see for yourself. It can be helpful, but it is good to go into the original records and just check. And very often you would not be able to find it in the index because the index doesn't exist yet. Thank you. Yes, the question was if these are the same regions as the archival regions. The answer is yes. Yes, exactly. On family search, the books are sorted exactly in the same way as they are sorted in the archives. If you didn't hear, our colleague searched in Prague archives, and her experience is that it is very clear, it is very user-friendly, but the archives in Brno are not that user-friendly. This is a feedback which I keep receiving quite often, and it is my experience as well, yes. But we are still now talking about the data which is available on Family Search. So if you look closer, it actually is pretty readable. What do you think? Well, for Slovakia, the Family Search works exactly the same way, and there are over 2 million scanned pages of records. Well, if you think of 4 million for the Czech Republic, 2 million for Slovakia, it is over 6 million scanned pages. There are, according to my experience, there are about 7, maybe to 12 records per page. It is 6 times 10, maybe 60 million of records. So you better know which village your ancestors came from, or be ready for long nights. 60 million records. Yes, these are all the records which have been scanned. Now, in a few minutes, I'll be talking about the individual archives, and the archives in the Czech Republic are not all at the same level of scanning being completed. But these are all the records which have been scanned and have been made available to Family Search. So basically, if we look at what Family Search as the first available resource, user-friendly, especially for Americans because it is in English, is offering to us, we can tell that the Slovak records are very complex there, and not all of them have been indexed, but almost all of them can be found there. The reason why Slovak records are on the Family Search and the Czech records not fully is because Slovakia chose a different policy of digitizing archives. They basically asked Family Search to go in and digitize it for them, and they gave the Family Search the rights to use the digitized copies. Whereas the Czech Republic goes its own Czech way. And our Czech way is that we don't want the other one to know that we learned from them only because they know better. And we believe there is always another way of doing it. So all the 8 archives, each one of these 8 archives went its own way. And that's why we can hear that the Prague archives is easier to deal with, and that the Třeboň archive has very high percentage of digitization. And the Brno archive is really hard to find your way around because you don't speak Czech or German, there is no English version. And the archive of Olomouc has very little portion of having digitized, or the one in Litoměřice, because each single archive went their own way. And poor Family Search has to deal with each single archive in the Czech Republic and basically negotiate with them under which conditions they would be willing to share the data or let Family Search to basically scan the records which they have. And that is why you will find as complete Slovak data on Family Search as you can dream of, but fairly incomplete about the Czech Republic. So, what are the other resources? Are there any other resources? In Slovakia, there are basically not, because it has been all done centrally, it's been done by Family Search, you can find it there. There is not really reason for more resources in Slovakia. Well, it is different in the Czech Republic, as I said. But there are some fairly well scanned archives, but we need to go one by one in order to be able to tell how they work. So, okay, let's look again on the Czech regions. Each region means one regional archive, each region means a different website, each region means a different policy of approaching these things. And the websites which are here, you don't need to copy because you have them in your notebooks. And all of them worked a month ago. Okay, let's start with Brno. Brno's website for digitized records are actapublica.eu. They love to be European Union website, not only Czech, because they share data with Lower Austria, which is the northern part of Austria, which is just next to the Czech Republic. And basically, the website in Brno, the data in the Brno archive are very friendly to anybody who speaks German, especially to people from Austria. And you can tell that the whole mindset when they were setting it up in Brno was, okay, we are one region, Southern Moravia and Northern Austria, so let's have one shared tool together and let's work with it. Unfortunately, they have not thought of other people, like Americans. So, no English. Sorry about that. Czech or German. And it is the same thing. It has been like that for several years already. So you can read Vítejte, but you don't read welcome. Well, but it is not that hard, even to search on the Brno website. You just need to use Google Translator for some things. So you have to push vyhledávání instead of search. And then you choose if you want to search in Brno or in Niederösterreich. If you are interested in our ancestors from the Czech Republic, you search Brno, of course. You put in the name of the town. You find your registers, and you just push the magnifying glass, and here you go. It is not that hard. The problem with the Brno archive is that not all of the registers have been scanned already. Not all of them have been put online. And you need to understand that these are really hundreds and hundreds of thousands of individual pictures. It is like sharing all of the family photographs of all of us here in this room and many other people on one single server, and expecting people from many different places from all around the world to be able to get on and research at the same time. So when some of the archives complain that they are or ask for patience because they are too slow in putting the data online, I have kind of understanding for that, because you really want high quality product. You want them to put a high resolution pictures online, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to read that. And if they put high resolution pictures online, of course it is data highly efficient, and that it is the amount of data is high and takes lots of space. Another archive is in Třeboň. Here is the website, how you can get there. And actually, Třeboň is the first archive which started digitizing. They did it on their own. They did most of their digitization without the help of family search. And their website is pretty intuitive. You would be able to find your way around very easily in English. Again, the main thing whenever you want to go online and you want to search for data about your ancestors online, the main thing is that you know the town that they came from, because otherwise it is really very complicated. Because as I said, but let me just reiterate that into more detail. The archives are basically sorted by parishes, individual churches by which the data was collected. Inside of the parish, it might be divided into individual towns, or it might not. But if you don't know the parish, you will hardly be able to find it, because there's just too much data. There are just too many books and too many pages for you to find. So you don't need to know the exact date of birth of your grandmother or grandfather, but what you do need to know is the place where she came from. And if you do not know that, it is like looking for a needle in a haystack. You can still find that, and there are ways of finding that, but it is way more complicated. And the ways would be like looking at frequency of the name, looking at little tiny details in your family stories, discerning what each information came from, and making sure that you are building up your theory on trustable information and not on something that has been just told to you and has no ground, but it is very complicated. So basically, when you want to start researching in the Czech Republic, your perfect starting point is if you know which area they came from. And there are ways to find out. You can look into old family letters, if you have any. You can search through old family Bibles. You can look at backsides of old family photographs. Obituaries are great. Look in newspapers for obituaries. Very often obituary says, Joseph Pokorny lived in this country for 42 years, and he came originally from Dolní Podsedlec in the Czech lands. It's like a pearl when you read this sentence. Another archive, Western Bohemia, the archive in Plzeň. You can research this archive online. They have a good portion of data online, but if you have ancestors from this region and you happen to come to the Czech Republic, I encourage you to come to Plzeň and visit this archive, because this is the communist-like building. There is no other archive in the Czech lands nowadays, I believe, which has not changed, unlike Plzeň. And I believe they do it on purpose. They want to make this an open-air museum, because you walk into this building and just the stucco is falling off, the walls are yellow, it's all kind of crashing on you, and you have a feeling like you walk into an old socialist-style offices. But inside is this very nice, very pleasant personnel, and they will help you out and they will encourage you to look through the registers. Plzeň does not have everything online. Plzeň has a good portion of records still offline. But on the other hand, it gives you also the opportunity to touch the real stuff. And as much as online things are comfortable and easier to handle, when you have the opportunity just to open an old register and have it in your hands and sense that this was written when my great-great-grandfather was born with a real human hand of a priest or of a minister, it has a flavor in it. The archives in Prague, I would say, very well organized, very helpful, in a modern building. Those of you who were at the Back to the Homeland conference about 12 years ago, 10 years ago, visited the archives of Prague. The archives of Prague are not able to put online all of the records which they have available. For speed reasons, because they don't have, they are behind in technology. But if you come to the archive, they have computers in there, and they let you use their computers and search on their computers, which can be done fairly quickly. Yes, please.
You encourage us to go there.
Sorry?
You encourage us to go there.
Well, if you cannot find it online, you either go there or you hire someone who does it for you. Litoměřice in northern Bohemia is a relatively small archive in a little old castle, and it is fairly well organized, and it has approximately 70% of its records covered online. So I would expect, if your ancestors are from northern Bohemia, I would expect that there is a good chance that you would be able to find their records online. Zámrsk, for many of us, the favorite one, castle in eastern Bohemia, region of eastern Bohemia where ancestors of many Americans of Czech origin came from. The online materials are in Czech, German and English, and it at the first sight seems that it is very easy to handle. Well, it is not. But the good news is that Zamers has a good agreement with Family Search, and basically what you can find in Zamers, you can find on Family Search. So if your ancestors are from Eastern Bohemia, if you have a long weekend, it's rainy outside, you know the fall season is approaching, you might want to fiddle with the Zamers website. And if you do find out how to handle it, it will do the work for you. If you don't worry and go to Family Search and try the previous way, and it will give you all the same data, and it might be easier than to access the Zamers archive. Opava, which is a Northern Moravian archive, covers several different counties, as you can see, and it communicates, but it has two websites, interestingly enough. One of them communicates only in Czech, and the other one communicates also in English. I played with it for several hours, trying to find out what is the difference between these two. How is it that they actually share the data on two different websites? Why is it so? And I have not found a single difference. I don't know. They just do it that way. So sometimes, as you say, even one Czech can have two opinions. Another interesting thing which you can look for online are cadastral maps. Cadastral maps go back to the times of Maria Theresia, and they cover basically all of the Czech lands and show you beautifully what the village or the town looked like at her times. It can be found on this website, but you have it also in your brochure, so you don't need to copy the website. It is in the material which I gave to you. Well, this is what the website used to look like only 3 years ago. If you got on, you were able to switch over into English. It had a choice between Czech and English, and then it gave you these nice choices.
Can you jump back? That link is not in the...
It is not? Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for having called me to order. So basically, this is the way it used to look only 3 years ago. Well, then they did a facelift, and they modernized the website. And this is what came out with it. It looks better, but it doesn't speak English at all. I have no idea why. It has no English version. So here nowadays you have to work with the Czech language, because this is what it looks like. But it is not that hard. The only thing, yeah, you can do that. I'm sure. Bob the Builder. The only thing which you need to do is to just click on the map of the Czech Republic and use the zoom sign and start zooming in. And you'll be just getting closer and closer in here. And when you are zooming in, you get closer and you get to see different little areas, basically towns and the surroundings. And when you get even closer, you see a little eye for information, and you click on the little eye, and you get this dialog box, shows you the results, and you click on the little zooming light, and it shows you the maps. I have no idea why most of the Czech materials which are online are so complicated. I have two explanations for that. Either it is being done by people who are just IT specialists, and they believe if I can do it, everybody can do that. and they never come back. They do it once, and they don't go back a half year and try to do it again, because they would realize that they had forgotten how they did it before, and it would make them frustrated themselves, and they would have to change it. So that is one possibility, that it is being done by these IT people. The other possibility is that it is being done by secretive people who want to claim that we as Czechs are as transparent as we can be, but actually we want to keep it secret. Well, but if you would be able to stumble through all these blocks of Czech language, push on the I in the end, it shows you all of the cadastral maps for your town that you are looking at, and then you choose a map, and well, sorry, I'll go back and make you aware of one more thing. It tells you not only which city it is, but it gives you also the year that it goes back to. So, for example, the town of Polička was mapped in 1839, and this is the map for Polička. You can see the city, you can see the wall around. Can I walk with this mic? No. You can see the city around the town. You can see the downtown as it used to be then. You can see the central square. You can see the fields around. So what I showed was the city, the walls around, the inner city, and the fields around the town. And then when you look at the maps, at the individual maps, it actually gives you close-ups. And look how beautiful it is. This is the inner city of the town of Polička, where I am from. Yes, please.
Would those be the house numbers on there?
And yes, those are house numbers. But please be aware, they don't correspond with nowadays house numbers. But they are the house numbers of 1839. And if you get even closer look, it looks like this. And basically, looking at that, you can see the dark red buildings, which are kind of church or municipal buildings. So in the right down corner, you can see the Catholic Church. The red square, which is close to that, with the number, I think it's 22, it's kind of blurred, is the Catholic Manse. And then in the right upper corner, you can see a municipal building, a building which used to be owned by municipality at those times. Another nice thing which it gives to you is that if you look at the houses, some of the houses are in a light red and some of the houses are in yellow. The houses in light red are built of brick or stone. The houses in light yellow of wood. So if you find your ancestral home, you can immediately say if it was in the year 1840 or around that year, a brick house or stone on one hand, or a wood house on the other hand. It also gives you information about the plots of land. The green areas are their gardens or fields, and you can see either little trees there, or you can see like little bushes there, and or several trees. It tells you if it was an orchard or if it was a garden or vegetable garden. Was not Maria Theresia a nice girl? And she did it all for future generations, so we would be having materials to work with. She was one of those people who was having a vision into the future. And well, there was one little side reason for which she did it also, not only for us: taxes. She wanted to know who owns what, so she could tax the people. She was very good at that. Yes.
I've been playing around with those maps in Western Bohemia, and a lot of them, when you blow them up, show the owner's name of the various plots with the house number, and then you can, of course, go back to the house numbers and see where they live, but you can see what fields they also were working.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the comment. If you didn't hear, experience of our colleague. She works with maps from Western Bohemia, and very often the maps show also owner names on the map.
That's true in general, or is that specific?
It is not true. It is not true in general. It is not true for. It was not part of the standard. Part of the standard is what I'm showing here to you, which is actually amazing. If you realize that 180 years ago, the emperors was able to send out crews of people who were geodetists and who were able to map the country according exactly to the same standards. And they came up exactly with the same types of maps for the whole country. 180 years before our time, way before internet. It is amazing. And then, of course, at some areas you had people who were even kind of going one step farther, and they would put the names of the owners in there. But be careful with the house numbers, because very often the numbers which you see here are not house numbers but plot numbers, which do not match the house numbers that we work with. So they could be deceptive. I suggest that you look for some landmark which stays the same. The Catholic Church, the little creek which is there. Just something which was there 200 years ago and is there still and didn't change its place. And then you try to kind of figure out where your house is, because don't just focus on the number. The number might be very easily deceptive. Yes, please.
When we were there, the numbers were in chronological order, not geographic order. When the house was built, was number one.
Yes, that is a comment to house numbering in the Czech lands. In general, it is so that in many villages the houses are numbered in chronological order. The houses were numbered in late 1700s, and by then the houses which were standing were numbered in a geographical order. They would usually start from the most important house in the center, which would be either the city hall or the Catholic manse, and they would go from there. But in the meantime, new houses were being built, and they were put in empty plots between these houses. So eventually, 200 years later, we find ourselves looking at numbers which are kind of zigzagging through the village. If you come to a village where the numbers are not in order, where they are in a complete chaos, it is a great news. If you come to a village where the numbers are in a nice order, it's bad. Why? Because the letter means it has been renumbered. And the number which you have in your old records doesn't correspond to the numbers which you see on the homes. So if you see numbers which are in a row, in an order, go to the city hall, ask the question, say, well, I'm looking for the old house number 22. Please tell me what is the current number. And they will say, we don't know. And you will say, yes, you do, just look it up. And they do. Just be stubborn. They can find it somewhere, somehow.
Some of the buildings have both numbers on them.
Right.
Those are not old and new numbers. Those are sometimes they are, but sometimes they are not. But yes, it's complicated. The Czech lands have two different kinds of numbering. Some of the towns in the Czech lands have two different kinds of numbering. They have so-called descriptive number and orientation number. Číslo popisné a číslo orientační. And the descriptive numbers are in a row, and the orientation numbers are kind of zigzagging, but it still does not mean that they are original. It's still kind of the chance is there, and it's a better chance, but ask twice before you will be sure that you found the ancestral house. Make sure that you are really standing in front of the home which you are looking for. It is to some extent like with the family names. You just don't trust what you see. So, Jan, with all of this chaos on Czech website, what can I do myself? Well, quite a bit. The first thing which you need to do, regardless of if you want to do it on your own or if you want to call for help in a while, you need to collect your data. And that is a job which probably will nobody do for you. You need to look into your own family, you need to find the certificates, wedding, birth, you need to look for obituaries, you need to look for ship manifests. Lobaka is here, the expert for ship manifests. You need to look for any document which you can find. And please, make sure that with every single information which you write down into your personal notes, you make a little note of where it comes from. Because it is very important that you will know 5 years, 10 years later, if this was based on a document, so you can trust it pretty much, or if it was based on hearsay and it is something which you heard in your family, or if it is something in the middle, like an obituary. It's typically, it's not really a legal document, it is something which was printed, but it was printed on information which was actually passed from one human to another human. And I'm not saying that hearsay information is bad or that it is not trustworthy. I'm just saying that you need to take into account that each single information might be wrong, and the percentage of error with hearsay information could be naturally way higher than with official documents. Official documents can be wrong as well. I saw many different, many records where you could see that the priest made just a mistake, but the probability is way lower with official documents than with hearsay information. So please keep track of where you found which piece of information. What you need to do next is to find the name of the village which your family came from. And that is very often the hardest. Because if you have done it yourself, you know that very often the ship manifests, the wedding records, the death certificates in the US say Bohemia. What is as bad as the word Bohemia is Prague. If your records show that your ancestors came from Prague, I give you 1% chance that it is true, no more. And I'm not going to negotiate about this. I did have one client whose ancestors really were from Prague, but only one. Usually they would put Prague in a situation when their village was small and it was anywhere 20 to 100 miles away from Prague. But the name of the parish is something which you can find very easily after you know the name of the village. And then you look which region it was from. Please keep in mind that many Czech villages have names which are reoccurring. One of the most notorious ones are Lhota, because Lhota is basically, it means a certain time frame, certain time. And the people, when new settlers would come into a land which was unoccupied, the landlord wanted to encourage them that they would start a village there and occupy the land. He gave them a certain time for which they didn't have to pay taxes and labor for him. So they called the village the time which they got, Lhota. And you would find dozens and dozens of villages of this name in the Czech lands. So just be aware that the name it can be reoccurring. Another typical name which it keeps reoccurring is Veselý. But there are more of those. This is the way you can start. If you want to do it on yourself, look for the region where your ancestors are from, get to the regional archive, look for the right parish, search online for the right book. And then it is very much about your ability to read the old scripts and your willingness to learn, because this is a lot about learning, and it is fun. It's fun to look how people would be writing letters very differently from nowadays. And in the library, there are several publications which deal with the old script, where you can look it up.
How do you find the right parish?
You combine map and the archive. You know which is the name of the village your ancestors came from. You open it on a map, let's say Google Maps, and in your other hand, you open the website of the archive, and you look if this village is one of the parishes. If it is not, you look for the villages around, and you kind of go in circle and try to find a village which is relatively near to this place. And if you find the village will tell the parish will tell you how many villages it covers. If you open the right parish, then it tells you which villages it covers. Yes, please.
I got it easier first. Go to Felix Wooddoctor's website, and he has a guarantee. Put in at least 3 letters of the village name and upper top that he put. All the parishes that village was a part of in the time frame.
And what is this called?
Felix Wooddoctor's first organ here, the website is called genealogical.ac, I think. And you have to become a member like we do at Family Search. But he's got a wonderful database. And that database is printed out. I don't know if the CGSI has a copy of, I want to say, the book from that database. I don't know if they brought them. I didn't see them up there. But that's another way to do it. Good, G-U-N-D-N-A-C-K-E-R. He's a researcher in Austria. There's another website, but it's harder to use. It is so easy to use. And if you don't have the correct spelling of the village, not a big deal, because like I said, all you need is 3 letters. You will get a list of all the possibilities of where the 3 letters are found in all the villages that they cover. And if you have some information like the reason it is because you cover several different regions, Bohemia, I don't remember what the other ones are. You can limit, what you are.
Well, I have a suggestion. I have a suggestion. This is a resource which I am not aware of at all. I think this would be great if you could come up here and type it in so people can see it on the screen. I'm at the end of my presentation. It would be the best if I have just 1 or 2 more slides to go. Why don't you come up here, because this is a resource which other people might want to use. Thank you. This is great. So, right? I'm supposed to save it first, I heard.
What I usually do is I search on his name because I could never remember his website.
He's a smaller guy. So I'm ready for your questions while we will be waiting for the computer to come up. Yes, please.
If we do need help, how can we contact you?
I can give you my card.
Is it on the CGSI website?
Yes, and I'm among researchers on the CGSI website. Yes.
When do you think the Trevor records will ever become available on Family Search?
I don't know, because they are partially available but partially not, and there must be some political issues going on between Family Search and Trebon, and I have no idea which way this is moving. The question was if Reformed records, the Protestant records, are separate from Catholic. Yes, yes. When you will look into your region, you will be having separately the Catholic parishes and the Protestant parishes, and the Jewish records are usually kept regional, plus good portion of Jewish records are being kept in Prague, in the Prague National Archives, in a completely different system. And you would not find the Jewish records very often online here.
On that note, the Protestant records prior to about 1845 to 1855 are going to be in the Catholic records. So depending on where the parish started, it's going to be anywhere from 1845 to 1855 when the Protestants kept their own records. Prior to that, it was Catholic.
Okay, I'll specify this even more, one more step. It was so that the Protestant parishes got restarted in 1781, and they started keeping their own records at the very moment when they got founded. But you are completely right that until 1840s, there was a legal obligation of any Protestant also to come to the Catholic parish and to get registered there, because the Protestant parishes did not have the legal authority of being the legal record keeper for the state. So basically between 1780s and 1840s, you would find them at both places, in the Catholic records and in the Protestant records. So, if I understand you correctly, for Slovakia it is so that immediately after 1780s, the Catholic parishes stopped taking records for the Protestants, and the Protestants can be found only in the Protestant records. Yes, please.
Are there any records prior to the 30 Years' War in the early 1600s?
For some parishes there are, for some parishes there are not. And it would not be that the parishes were not taking the records. The problem is that it was such a major turmoil that many of the churches burnt down. Many of the registered books were stolen or just disappeared. That is the reason. And it is a matter of pure luck. If your family is from a parish which was able to keep their old records as well or not. And it kind of tells you, when you are going back, the record books are numbered. And number 1 is always the oldest one. So if you get into number 2, you know that you are the game is almost over.
Was there ever any census in the tradition of American census taken during the 19th century in Bohemia or in the Austrian Empire for families, name the family ages, that could connect them with the number of the house number?
Yes.
Yes, but the problem is again that it is region to region and town to town. In many towns these are complete, in many areas these are they are fully incomplete. Yes, but the response is yes, there are. Yes.
They started about 1869, and this is the only way I was able to find my great-grandmother because of other problems, because it turned out to be, at the time, research. I would highly, highly recommend that everyone gets their house record number. They are according to house number, not name. And they went from 1869 to 1921, some location years, because they were again lost. and they are in every other town. It's like a county, those counties changed or whatever, so it's very difficult to find those records.
If, I found that if they're anywhere, they're in the district archives. And it's hit and miss on what they have. There were a lot of them destroyed. This archive might have, the ones that I got that had 1869 and 1880, but later ones were missing. And I think there was also an 1857 one taken also.
I even saw from 1852 in some districts. But it is exactly true what you are saying. The problem is that these are materials which are first not available online, and secondly, even worse, they are not available in the regional archives. They are available in the district archives, basically county archives. And these county archives have tons and tons of materials, out of which some has been sorted, some not has been sorted. And if you are lucky and you need what has been sorted, it is a great resource. But very often you spend hours and hours searching and you don't find the right thing just because either it is not there or it is there but it has not been sorted. Yes, please.
Are there any records that an immigrant, of immigration from a town or from a district?
Yes, there are passport requests of people who have legally asked for permission to leave the country. And again, if the request is there, if it has been preserved, then it can be found if it is sorted. But also the problem is that only approximately 10% of people who came to the United States came legally. 90% of your ancestors came illegally. They left illegally their country. Which means that in that case, there is no record. They just one day disappeared.
Well, Michael, indexing for Fairman Search, and 95% of the indexes are English. They definitely need people to index in other languages, and it's not that hard to do. It's basically data entry. So if you can speak other languages, read other languages, get into it.
If you didn't hear, looking for summary family search indexers, you can apply. Yes.
Yeah, in the Tremont archives, I found my great grandfather and his brother, but it says Do Americi, and then it has, the date is almost the same. It's not the date that they immigrated. At first, I thought it was the date that they immigrated, but it isn't. It's 1867, and they came in 70.
Well, I would still be thankful for this. This is a note of a priest who actually, because he was going through these books and all of a sudden he realized, hey, this guy has not been to my mass for quite some time. I need to ask what is going on with him. So he asked and they said, oh, he left for America. So he made, many priests being really kind of people who liked the order, made a little note, odcestoval do Ameriky, he left for America, which is good for you because it's kind of a second proof that it is really your ancestor. But these notes have been put later on after the people were gone for a long time.
You could minimize that date and then she could show us the website.
That is a good idea. Thank you. It does not let me to do that. It is saving the presentation. It will take a while. I did, but I'm afraid we'll lose it. Okay, do you have more questions?
What can you say about a journal that some of the villages kept of the happenings?
It's chronicles.
You mean village chronicles, which kind of talk about the history of the village? They are a very good, very interesting source of information. What is important for you to ask when you are dealing with village chronicles, town chronicles, is when did they start? it doesn't matter how far back they go into history. It matters way more when the first chronicler picked up the pencil and started writing. Because the village chronicles typically tend to start in the old times, centuries and centuries ago. And they write about the history which happened before the chronicler lived, according to what the people remembered. Which is good, but it is important for you to know that this is information which is being passed from generation to generation and might not be that reliable. As then the information which was putting on by the chronicler during his lifetime. So I would say yes, it is a great resource of information, but you have to make distinction between if it was written by the people who have really witnessed the situation, or if it was a tale which they heard from the past. Yes, please.
For anyone that's interested in taking that next step that Jan has invited us to take, come to the presentation Saturday afternoon for a checklist, and we'll help you get a little farther.
Usually there are no cemetery records. I saw just very few cemeteries which were having records, and usually cemeteries are not great resource of information. Usually you would not find a gravestone which would be having the right name for you. It is so that graves are being kept in the same family from generation to generation, but very often they are not, the gravestones have been changed. Let me start something else. I'm trying to open a Word document. Why this is.
I don't know how that works. I don't know. You can just get into a browser.
Well, yeah, I will. Why don't you just type it in here into the Word? Because I'll try to get you online, but I wonder if I'll be able to do that. Well, thank you for having come to this lecture. And hopefully we'll be able to get online now.